Okay, next in our series on the hiring process in recruiting, we're going to cover timing and position planning. And this is Matt Haver with Foundation and Recruiting and Consulting. So, first thing to cover when you're planning out your position is, are you ready to hire? So, is the timing right? Do you have the position officially approved? Is it open within the organization? Do you have the budget both for the salary, and if you're going to use a third party recruiter, do you have budget approved for recruiting fees? When do you need the person by? You want to budget out enough time based on how rare the skill set is, what your ability to attract is. You want to have at least 3 to 6 weeks lead time for how long it's going to take to recruit and get people through the process. It adds an additional 2 to 4 weeks for each new round of search if you're doing active searches. So keep that in mind. You may need to run the process multiple times, um, but starting your search more than about 8 weeks out is going to be too early. You're going to get people um, where there's going to be too much of a gap between when candidates are ready and you're going to start losing people due to timing. So if you're planning on having somebody start more than 8 weeks out, probably pause, make sure you have all your ducks in a row, and then come back to the process when you're about 8 weeks out. Could be a little bit longer if you have a long recruiting process. Um, then do you have everybody available for the hiring process? So do you have your hiring team available for the next 3 to 8 weeks? You're gonna have 1 to 2 weeks of sourcing where your recruiters or whatever process you have of attracting candidates, hopefully you have an active process in addition to a passive process, depending on how tough it is to attract these types of candidates. I mean, if you have a very standard type skill set where there's lots and lots of candidates available, you might not need as long. But if you have anything that's kind of mid-level all the way up through C-suite, normally you need at least 1 or 2 weeks of sourcing to get the process started. So, is your hiring team going to be available for approximately the next 3 to 8 weeks? Um, are there going to be any key people in the process that are going to be out? And does that mean that the process can't move forward, or can you have other people fill in for them, either temporarily or completely as part of the process? Generally speaking, if you're going to have a major interrupt in the middle of your interview process, that's not good timing. So you want to try to have a workaround for that. Um, that's going to create bad candidate experience, and it could also just kill the timing of the situation and waste a lot of time, both for your recruiter, whether that's an external recruiter or an internal recruiter, and everybody in the hiring process. Because if there is a major delay in the middle of the process, you're probably going to lose candidates, and again, you're going to create a bad candidate experience. Um, and then consider market conditions and adjust your time frame accordingly. So if you have a very candidate driven market like we had in say like 2021, 2022, then you want to be able to move extremely fast and you want to have your time frame based around that. Right now, it's mid 2025. This is a very company based market. It doesn't mean to that you should just mess around and create a bad candidate experience based around that. But candidates are going to be a little bit more flexible. There's a lot of high quality candidates that are actively looking because they've been laid off or their work is disrupted in one way or another. But so adjust your time frame, but that doesn't mean create a bad candidate experience, obviously. Okay, so next would be position planning. So what's the position? Do you have a categorical idea of what it is? Is it direct hire? Is it contract? Is it temporary? Is it contract to hire? I generally don't recommend contract to hire. That's kind of a side point. But you know, what basis are you looking to hire this person on? And do you have good reasons for that? So not a ton of time, but there's definitely times when an organization I talk to, they think that they need a direct hire for somebody, but they really only need a contractor or they need somebody on a temporary basis. It's really more of a turnkey project, and once that's complete, they're not going to have the work basis for that person to continue on a full-time basis. So these are the kind of things you want to think about. And then if it is a contractor, what type of contractor based on legal considerations and then the type of engagement. So that's generally going to be a W-2 contractor, 1099, corp to corp. Depending on your organization, you also can consider like a nearshore or offshore model. So those are kind of a variety of different types of bases if you're going to go the contract route. Um, if it is a contract or a temporary worker, what's the time frame for that? What's the reason for the time frame, and then how long do you expect that to be? And that way you can have that fully developed with your job description and when you're setting those expectations with candidates you're talking to. What work statuses can the company consider? So for a lot of companies, that's just going to be U.S. citizen, green card holders, and then there are some visas that are um, fairly easy to work with that are almost like a U.S. citizen or green card holder, like an H4 EAD. Depending, TNs used to be very popular. They're not quite as popular anymore because they're just a little bit less stable. So TN visa holders are people who are Mexican and Canadian citizens. So what kind of work statuses are you able to work with based on what your company is comfortable with, your organization is comfortable with, and what their capabilities are. So, visa candidates are a good way to go if you're able to do that under certain circumstances, but there is more of a risk for those types of situations. There's a lot more costs involved. You need legal counsel of some form. So these are some of the considerations for one of those pieces. And because you can't be considering candidates that you're not going to be able to hire, right? Is this position a new position or is it a replacement position? If it is a replacement, what's the reason for the replacement? Is there any sort of issue that needs to be addressed organizationally for why that person left? Hopefully you had a good exit interview and the reason, best case scenario, they left on very good terms or you promoted them within the organization. But if there was some sort of issue, you want to make sure you address that and not hire somebody into a bad situation. You want to identify all the stakeholders for the role. So anybody who is going to be important, the actual hiring manager, but also a lot of times for positions, you might have the hiring manager, you might have somebody who is over the skill set or the technical aspects. You may have people in other parts of the organization who are going to weigh in, possibly other executives. So you want to make sure that you get buy-in from all the major stakeholders, and then everybody's on the same page of what the position is and what the expectation of the role will be and what the person's going to be doing. So identify all the stakeholders and gather their input on the position. Next would be what are the goals and expectations and the impact of the positions. Basically, what's this person going to be doing? What is going to be the expectations for them being successful, and then also coming up with some success metrics. So 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, a year, and long term. What is this person going to be doing day in, day out? What are their goals? How do you know they're successful? How do they know they're successful? And coming up with what those expectations are. If you have a predefined position, you might already have a handle on that. If it's a new position, you definitely want to flesh that out. Consider if there's going to be any sort of growth opportunities with the role. Sometimes that's going to be very specific, like you're hiring for a particular level, like a lead, and you very specifically want them to grow into a manager. Or you're hiring for a manager, you very specifically want them to grow into a director. So you want to probably discuss that with the candidate, include that in the description. But even with regular positions, you want to have an idea, is there any sort of growth path for this position or for high performers in this role? Or are we just kind of, this is what this is going to be forever? And that way you can kind of set and manage expectations around that. Some candidates, it depends on the type of role, right? And then also the individual candidate, whether they're looking for growth. There are certain types of positions which you do a particular thing and you kind of do that forever, and that's okay depending on what it is. And then there's other types of positions and other types of candidates that very specifically want to be growing their career and next steps. And so you just want to have an idea of what that looks like and have a good idea. Again, if it's something very specific, then you want to cover that very specifically, and then otherwise you just want to have an idea of what that looks like. For each requirement that you have for this position, you want to understand, why is this necessary? Or if we set this requirement, what do we mean by this? A lot of times for particular requirements for a position, somebody will throw out, okay, we want this particular certification, or we want this particular educational piece, or we want this particular, X number of years with a particular technology, or whatever the case may be. But they may not understand really what they're going to be getting when they ask for that, or sometimes it's not even possible. Like it's kind of like a joke in recruiting where organizations will ask for some a certain number of years of some skill set that's more than that skill set's been around, like a new technology. We want 5 years of this, but it's only been in the market for 3 years. Um, so just understand why you're setting those expectations, and then also, can we be flexible on that? Are there other ways to look at individual requirements, uh, and how will that affect our candidate pool, right? If we be very rigid on these very specific sets of requirements, are we going to be able to attract the quality and the number of candidates that we're looking for? So, and then reporting structure. So again, we talked about having all the stakeholders, but who specifically will this person be reporting to? Will there be any dotted line reporting? And then are there going to be any people reporting up into this position? And what does that reporting structure look like? And then, like I said before, you want to conduct a in-depth needs analysis with all the stakeholders, all the people in the hiring team, and make sure that everybody's on the same page of generally what the position looks like. The next video that I'm going to put out is going to be talking about building out your description and how you structure that. So we'll get into more details on that piece in the next video. Again, this is Matt Haver with Foundation Recruiting and Consulting. Thanks.